Hey guys, it's Abby with So Homey, and today you are joining me in my living room for a little experiment. We are going to be testing which blocking method is the best for 100% acrylic yarn. Now, this whole topic was brought about because I was curious whether or not it actually is worth it to block 100% acrylic yarn. You know, I was under the impression that only animal and plant fibers were supposed to be blocked after you knit or crochet them. However, it turns out I was completely wrong. Now, before we get any further into this video, let's go ahead and define blocking. So when you hear this term whenever you're knitting or crocheting, blocking just means that it is the process of applying water to a piece of fabric that's knit or crocheted, and you straighten out those stitches. In the process of researching, I read countless blog posts and forums on the topic of blocking acrylic yarn. Now, I did become convinced that acrylic yarn should be blocked. However, none of them actually convinced me of the best way to block 100% acrylic yarn. And there are a few reasons that I'd like to outline briefly. First of all, most of the resources out there will suggest that steam blocking acrylic yarn is the way to go, but they never provide a reason why, and they never compare to other blocking methods, and that is with the exception of one video that I found. But without any comparisons, how can we know that steam blocking really is the best way? Next, most resources that I found only show knit swatches. Now, I also like to crochet, so that really raises the question of whether or not knit and crochet pieces should be blocked in the same manner, because knit and crochet stitches are constructed differently. So should we assume that the same method of blocking is the best for both crafts? Another reason I wanted to do this experiment is because some forums and blog posts say that acrylic yarn should never be blocked. And their reasoning is that applying too much heat to the acrylic yarn can kill the fibers. And in their defense, I saw many photos of lifeless, ruined pieces of fabric. However, there are many methods to blocking acrylic yarn, and not all of them require the use of heat. So I took it upon myself to test all of the different blocking methods. Now, I designed this experiment so that all of these questions will be answered, and you will know by the end of this video the best way to block 100% acrylic yarn. Right now, I am pinning down my swatches, getting ready to block them. So while I do this, let me walk you through the experiment. So to set up this experiment, I had to knit 6 swatches and crochet 6 swatches. And I chose the single crochet stitch and the stockinette stitch. And that is because these two stitches both have a natural tendency to curl. So the theory is if any of these blocking methods work for these stitches, then it should apply to other knit and crochet stitches as well. So I used 100% acrylic yarn, of course. It's a number 4 weight yarn, and I used a 5mm crochet hook and set of knitting needles to create these swatches. After I have 5 of each swatch pinned down to a blocking mat, I will go ahead and test out 5 different blocking methods. Now, the first 3 are the main ones, which will be wet, spray, and steam, and then I added 2 others just for the sake of the experiment, which are the washer and dryer and the hair dryer method. Now, I will walk you through all of these blocking methods in the next segment of this video. First up is spray blocking, and it's super simple. Just grab a spray bottle and fill it up with water, and then you will spray whatever your project is. So you want to make sure that each piece becomes saturated with water, and it also helps if you just use your fingertips and press down that water into those fibers. And you really want to concentrate along the edges because those are where they curl the most. So evenly apply the water. Next up is wet blocking, and for this blocking method you want to make sure that you completely submerge your project in water. And a good tip for this one is you see those bubbles in the water, press down on your fabric until you no longer see any bubbles, and your fabric should be soaked enough. Sometimes you need to leave it to soak a little longer, but these are really small, so it didn't take very long. And then you just take them out and you want to squeeze the excess water, but don't twist your fabric, otherwise you're going to felt it. Next, you want to pin down your project in the exact dimensions your project should be at the end of blocking. Now, sometimes it requires the use of pens like these swatches, but not all projects will require pens. But then you just let this sit and dry, and then you'll unpin later. Next up is steam blocking, and this method is super simple if you have a steamer like I do. So you just hover the steamer over the project that you want to block, and then you really want to concentrate on those edges to straighten out and make sure that they're not going to curl anymore. And I also like to press the steam into the fabric periodically just to really get those fibers wet, and the heat will also help to straighten out all of those stitches. Now, if you don't have a steamer, then use the steam setting on your iron, and this method will work just as well for that. The next blocking method is very unconventional, but I came across it in a forum and I thought it would be a good idea to try it out. So we're using a hairdryer and we're going to use the low setting. Don't use the cool button like I did at first, because you actually do need the heat from the hairdryer to actually work. And just like the steam blocking method, you really want to concentrate along those edges so that you can erase any curling. And when you're holding the hairdryer over your project, you want to make sure that you have at least 6 inches or so, just so that you don't apply too much heat too quickly. And then I also just press down sometimes just to see how hot the fibers were, because I did not want to kill the fibers, because that was a warning with this method. For the final method, I threw these swatches into the washer and then the dryer, but I took them out of the dryer when they were still damp, because I wanted to check on them and there is still some curling. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pin these and then let them dry and check out how this method works. Okay guys, it is the moment that we have been waiting for. I'm about to unpin all of the swatches to see which blocking method worked for acrylic yarn. I want to take you along with me, so let's just switch angles and you can watch me unpin, and then we will go through the results just side by side. We'll look at the swatches and then we will group all of the crochet ones together and see which blocking method for acrylic yarn worked the best, and then we'll do the same for knitting. So let's go ahead and jump into that. I wanted to take you along with me for this portion of the video, but in all honesty, this is super boring. So I'm just going to speed through this. All I'm doing is unpinning each of my swatches for the 5 different blocking methods. And once I do this, I'm going to compare them all side by side. I'll do first crochet and then knitting, and we will see which method worked best for blocking acrylic yarn. Here are all of my swatches for the crochet pieces. The original is in the top left, just for comparison's sake. Now, again, you can see how much curling is actually involved in this swatch. All of the edges curl, and it's just not straight. So the best method that I found was steam blocking, and you can see in this piece it pretty much lays completely flat. And even whenever I'm messing with it, you don't really see much curling up of the edges. Now, the next best method for blocking acrylic yarn when you crochet is the wet. You can only see a few places where there is that curling edge, but other than that, it worked pretty well. It lays pretty flat. Now, the next best method for crochet was the hairdryer method. Now, this edge tended to curl a lot more than the wet blocking, and that could have been because I didn't concentrate as much on that side with the hairdryer, but this method worked pretty well. Next, we have the washer dryer method, and this one did not compare to other blocking methods. You can see that all of the edges still curled, and sorry, I got something on there. And it just doesn't look as good as the previous blocking methods. It looks closer to the original. But I would say that spray blocking was actually the worst method for the crochet swatches, all of the edges curl, and it doesn't look a whole lot different than the original. So for whatever reason, spray blocking didn't work, but wet blocking did. So that concludes the blocking methods for crocheting acrylic yarn. Now we will compare our knit swatches. So here are all of the swatches laid out from best blocking method to worst blocking method. And here is the original, and you can see that it had a lot of curling at the beginning. It definitely needed to be blocked, but the top and bottom edges seem to curl, but not the two sides. So it is quite obvious that steam blocking is most definitely the best way to block acrylic yarn whenever you knit. So let's take a look at this swatch. You don't see hardly any curling at the top and bottom, just the top a little bit, but not even that much. And the bottom is pretty much flat, and then the back side, you don't see any curling along those edges at all. So steam blocking definitely worked, and I would suggest this if you want to block your knitting with acrylic yarn. Next is the hair dryer, and you can see the top has a little bit of curling, but the sides don't at all. So I think that heat definitely plays a big role in blocking acrylic yarn whenever you knit. Now our next best method would be wet blocking. There's a slight curl at the top and bottom, the top more so, and then for some reason that edge wanted to curl in after I blocked it with wet blocking. So this method worked, but not as well as the previous two methods. The last two methods I really wouldn't recommend for blocking acrylic yarn whenever you knit. Look at this swatch that I spray blocked. The sides curl, the top and bottom curl, and it just resembles the original, just a slightly less version of it. Now, the washer and dryer method is almost identical to the original. Now, the top and bottom curl a lot, and the sides want to curl inward as well. So I just really wouldn't recommend this method whenever you want to block acrylic yarn after you knit it. And that concludes our results section. Well, that was a very fun experiment, and we learned that whenever you want to block acrylic yarn, the best method to do so is steam blocking, and that is for both knit and crochet. Now, if you don't have a steamer or the steam setting, then there are next best methods, and those do differ whenever you crochet and knit. But we would not have known this if we hadn't done this experiment. So thank you for following along with me. I had a blast doing this. I hope to do more experiments like this, so any ideas, let me know in the comments below. Again, thank you so much for joining me on this journey, and if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. That really helps out the algorithm for my channel. And if you'd like to see any more videos like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next video.